but also integrated pest management. We want to maximize the use of eco-friendly strategies and minimize the use of toxic chemicals. Biological controls, therefore, are important. This is a conference on biology. We need to study more of that. But always, remember, we should talk in terms of total factor productivity: land, water, labor, energy, and the chemicals that go into it. And we need technologies for all of that if we are going to significantly increase the productivity from the same amount of land and water that we now have, and without being as disruptive and unsustainable as we are. And if we improve the nutritional content, it will have great health benefits, and it may even go beyond just food and into vaccines. I mentioned vitamin A rice, which, as you know, could not have been done without transgenics. That was the work of Ingo Potrikis and Ron Bayer. And I also want to mention that, in fact, that's not the only case. The white and golden rice, as it was called, it's also available in sweet potatoes with and without beta-carotene. There's high iron rice. And there's this, my favorite picture, which has nothing to do with pigs. The two pigs, this is from Winrock. The two pigs are twins. One was fed regular maize, one was fed quality protein maize. And I think that's quite compelling as an image of what better nutritional content can do, that these twins have grown this way. We have barely tapped the potential for fish farming and sea farming, and we're still artisanal in many of these things, but there's a lot of promise for longer, more productive lives. But that has to be done working with natural resources. We are already major disruptors of the ecosystems of the earth, and probably the most important environmental action is to reduce the need for bringing more land under cultivation, as it will not only be a way of producing more grain, but there may be losses in biodiversity, there may be losses in terms of soil erosion, and water. Water is so important. I'm glad we have many of the world's leading experts in water, including my friend Peter Glick here today. Agriculture uses about 65 to 70% of the water today, and in the global assessment that was done by IMI, it's about 70%, and in our developing countries, it's 80 to 90% of the water. And for our food, about a liter per calorie is what we need. So the average person consumes 2,700 calories. To produce them, we need 2,700 liters a day. And we know already the problems that exist in areas like China. The Yellow River, as early as 1996, did not reach the sea for 220 days. And in Egypt, the Nile has to reach the sea because it washes out the salts of the delta, and it reaches Cairo with 12 million tons of salt and reaches the sea with 34 million tons of salt. If it didn't carry that out, all our prime agricultural land would salinize. But we're still using a lot of water. This is an average image of a rice field, and we are pumping underground water in many parts of the world. To do this with dropping water table. In Syria, water tables are dropping a meter a year for the last 30 years. And this is what it looks like. This is an image I like a lot because people don't imagine what does it mean, a lowering water table. This is a communal well in the Sahel, and where the water table has been dropping, and people have now dug deeper, and they go down, 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 and they get a few drops of muddy water from the bottom, and when that will disappear, then of course you have desertification and environmental refugees. Currently, it's between 2,000 and 4,000 tons of water to produce 1 ton of rice, 1,200 tons of water to produce a ton of wheat on average. We can do much better than that. Simplest, immediate way would be to shorten growth duration, to find levees for water management in uneven fields, to do land leveling, and to do soil puddling for transplanted rice, dry sowing of rice, but reducing pollution is also essential. And this is an important part of the CGIAR work because people assume that the CGIAR tells people to use more pesticides, which it does not. In fact, it argues that dropping pesticide use does not drop the yield of rice beyond a certain level. But all of that is being swamped on the environmental side by what's happening with climate change. And I think this is the most serious issue facing humanity. despite the fact that some figures in the IPCC may or may not have been quite precise about whether it is in 2035 or 2070, the trend towards losing the glaciers is real, and the trend towards increasing storms is real. This is from even that well-known scientific journal, the National Geographic, which is a popular journal, but it maps the hurricane tracks for 10 years, 1985 to 1995, and then the hurricane tracks in the same area for 95 to 2004. First 10 years, next 10 years, I think we can clearly see that it's increasing, and as sea level rise occurs, what is going to happen to a number of countries, including our own, and here's Alexandria, in fact, we will become like a nifty little island, because the sea will probably go to Zahir, as we say, behind Alexandria. Alexandria is still 2 meters higher, but on the whole delta, you have a major impact, which you can see here, depending on the estimated rise, the actions that are taken, that anywhere between several thousand square kilometers of cropland could be lost, and some millions of people could be affected. So what do we do about that? A special session exists on that today. Now, the third, last theme is technology, industry, and the environment. And technology has been associated with production, with industry, and it was largely chemical in the past. This image was an advertisement, actually, for a plant in Bhopal. But it's the same plant that actually produced an accident of toxic fumes, one of the worst industrial accidents in history, where about 2,000 people were killed. We know that there's a major problem of waste management, toxic waste management, and when you bury it and it leaks, you have these kind of moonscapes where nothing can grow, and especially in Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union, we see some areas where radioactive material has leaked. So what can biotechnology do for us? I don't know. But I do know that we are facing an era of convergent technologies, which in Arabic is a nifty acronym because bint means girl, and we want to empower girls and women. But actually, I meant bio-info nanotechnologies are converging in many ways, and transformative research capable of changing the paradigms is taking place. So what's happening in these new industries? Some of you may know the work of Dr. Mustafa Sayed using nanomolecules to kill cancer cells. There are other ways of dealing with that, including everything from DNA computing to locking receptors on a cell. It's beginning to permeate a number of industries. Nano is growing fast, but do we know or have we reflected on what the potential impacts of nano might be on our own bodies if nanoparticles can go through cell walls? New technologies, especially for water, what can we do? We have water needs. The membrane technologies will be discussed, and there are several sessions that are devoted to that, and many others as well. But science is advancing every day on many fronts. And Arthur Clarke had this great quotation saying, any technology that is sufficiently advanced seems like magic. And just reflect. If I told somebody 20 years ago that we would stand here, hold a little device that's smaller than my hand, and that you could, unconnected to any wires, just punch in a number and find one particular individual out of the 6.5 billion people on the planet, and that the person would speak to you immediately, and that you would be able to find that person whether they were in Australia or Europe or Latin America or in Cairo or next door. Most people would have thought that this is unbelievable. Today, not only we take mobile phones for granted, we start saying, oh my God, look, it's taking so long to get connection. Right? We become very impatient. So there are many examples, but in this conference we are going to have the privilege of discussing one particular area which is quite unusual, which is biorobotics. Yes, there is a search for artificial intelligence going on, but there's also some very interesting work being done on biorobotics. Robotic equipment not only exists in factories, as we well know, but also in biological institutes, in the storage of samples, And it's becoming cheaper and cheaper. This is a graph from The Economist in 2008 that shows the costs of replacing human workers in factories by robots. So the robots are here to stay, and the question is, how does the biology link to them? Well, Rubinsky and Wan in Berkeley did the biotransistor back in 2000, and since then, of course, we've had a question of, can cyborgs really exist? And we'll hear from the real pioneers, those who actually build robots for a living, like Bruno Maisonnier, and that's his little friend Nao, whom you will be seeing later tomorrow. Paolo Dario, who mimics the studies of animals for the benefit of humans, and Hiroshi Ishiguro, who is designing Geminoids, which look exactly like humans. And I guess the first application is to have one that you can put at your desk while you go out and play and let the boss think that you're still you're still working. But the Geminoids are very good. You can't tell who's who. But we have actually, if I may say, with us another great pioneer of a different sort, Kevin Warwick, who can rightly be called, I think, the first cyborg, because he has actually implanted the chip and it interacts with his own body. Miguel Nicolelis is an old friend and pioneer who has been dealing with reading the brainwaves of monkeys and leading that to actual robots, linking between the USA and Japan, and many other fascinating experiments. And he started with a beautiful small monkey called Belle on these issues. But anything that deals with biology, whether it's biorobotics or other things, raises ethical issues. And I used to use this graph back in the 90s, and I used to say, where are we going in biotechnology? And I put 2000, 2010. We're now on the second rung of this ladder. And I said, I think we will be assembling genomes like Lego pieces in the future. And we used to laugh that we would be producing corn that looks like that. But this is actually not a cartoon. Huh? This one is a cartoon. This is real. This cucumber is real. So, cartoon, reality. A lot of interesting things going on around the world. But assembling genomes has already happened. And in June 2007, already, Craig Venter at Venter Institute talked about synthetic life forms and, in fact, filed a patent, both in the United States and in WIPO on this. And the DNA molecule was constructed from scratch, inserted into an oocyte, and gotten to express itself. And the purpose of that was to create new biofuels from single-cell organisms. And in essence, the question is, why not? Because we're already harnessing yeast as a factory, and doctors know that artemisinin, which is essential for malaria, quinine-resistant malaria, is now being done actually with support from the Gates Foundation in yeast. Another and separate effort, George Church at Harvard is planning to do something, and he started talking about the publication as of last year, and we expect something this year on creating a cell from scratch, amino acid by amino acid. I don't know how far he is. Last time I spoke to him about a little over a year ago, year and a half ago, he said to me that he was on track. We were together in New York with Kofi Annan on a biotechnology group, and Mahmoud is here also, was in charge of Merck vaccines at the time, was in that group, and we discussed these issues en passant. But there's a group of people who are actually dealing with synthetic biology, and they're raising some transformative questions about how the discipline may go into the future. That's the synthetic part. But the real life part, and again here, as a librarian I speak, I'm very happy to offer you the Encyclopedia of Life. And this is a major project with most of the big institutions of the world. And the idea is to go on site. We have a homepage from which you can go to 1.9 million pages, each of which is devoted to one species. And behind that are 300 to 600 million pages of scientific literature on biodiversity.